The preliminary investigation report of Air India flight AI-171 has uncovered some revelations that have created a new mystery in the aviation world. Just seconds before the crash, both engines' fuel switches were turned from the run position to cut off. Aircraft were either boarding passengers or taxiing on the runway, while every 5 minutes, planes were either landing or taking off. Among these, Air India's Boeing 787 Dreamliner, with tail number VTMB and flight number I-171, stood ready for departure to London. The aircraft reached the V1 speed of 153 knots by 1:38 p.m., and the VR speed of 155 knots was reached soon after. The plane took off without any issues, but what followed was far from normal. Just 3 seconds later, the aircraft reached 180 knots, meaning the engines were still producing thrust. So why did the fuel switches get turned off? Was it a mechanical failure, or was it done on purpose? The FAA had issued a bulletin in 2018 about the risk of fuel control switch locking mechanisms failing, which had been reported in some Boeing 737 aircraft. What's your take on the matter? This raises concerns that such issues could have occurred in the AI-171 aircraft. According to the Enhanced Flight Data Recorder, the fuel switches for both engines were suddenly turned off, one after the other, just a second apart. Or if it was deliberate, could it be linked to suicide, similar to other tragic aviation incidents? In the case of 171, the pilots did attempt to turn the switches back on, and a distress signal was sent just before the crash. The aircraft's nose was even seen to rise seconds before the crash, indicating that the pilots might have hoped to regain thrust. This led to the fuel supply being cut off, and the engine speeds began to drop rapidly, meaning the engine's thrust diminished drastically. The aircraft had arrived from Delhi 2 hours earlier and was preparing for its next flight. The investigation team has yet to confirm which pilot made the comment. CCTV footage revealed that shortly after takeoff, the ram air turbine deployed, a sign that something unusual had occurred, as the RAT is used to generate emergency power when the engines fail. The aircraft began losing altitude rapidly, and data confirmed that the engines were no longer producing thrust as they dropped below their minimum ideal speeds. A distress signal was sent at 1:39 p.m., but there was no response from the aircraft. Soon after, the aircraft crashed 1,600 meters from the runway, striking buildings and spreading debris over a wide area. Tragically, 12 crew members, 229 passengers, and 19 people on the ground lost their lives. The cockpit had Captain Sumit Sabharwal, aged 56, with 15,600 total flying hours, including 8,200 hours on the Boeing 787. Fuel switches on this aircraft model have a locking mechanism to prevent accidental switching. To turn the switches on or off, both hands of the pilot are required, making it nearly impossible for one hand alone to do so. The question then arises, if the pilots didn't switch off the fuel deliberately, who did? If it was a mistake, how did both switches turn off in quick succession? His co-pilot, 32-year-old Clive Cunder, had 3,400 total flying hours, with 1,128 of those on the Boeing 787. Both pilots had passed a breath analyzer test an hour before the flight and were deemed fit to fly. The big question is, who did this? When the engine started to stutter after the fuel cut off, one pilot asked why the fuel had been cut off. During this flight, a minor technical issue had been resolved by maintenance engineers. With 230 passengers on board, the plane had been refueled with 54,200 kilograms of fuel, and its takeoff weight was 213,400 kilograms. All within normal limits for a Boeing 787. There were no signs of hazardous materials on board, and everything appeared routine. After boarding at 1:13 p.m., The aircraft requested pushback and startup clearance. The aircraft was instructed to line up on runway 23, with calm weather conditions and visibility recorded at 6,000 meters. Everything seemed perfect for a normal takeoff, and the other pilot responded that he hadn't done it. What could have caused both engines' fuel switches to be turned off during such a critical time, right after takeoff? Were the switches faulty? Was it done intentionally? Or was it due to some malfunction? This situation has drawn comparisons to similar accidents in aviation history where pilots deliberately caused crashes, such as in Germanwings Flight 9525 in 2015. We will delve into these details to understand what exactly happened in this case. On the morning of June 12, 2025, Ahmedabad International Airport was operating as usual. The weather was warm and the sky was clear. The aircraft had earlier operated flight AI-423 from Delhi to Ahmedabad. At 1:37 p.m., co-pilot Kunder initiated the takeoff, with Captain Sabharwal monitoring. In the cockpit voice recorder, a pilot could be heard asking why the fuel switches had been cut off, and the other pilot responded that he hadn't done it. The investigation revealed that after the crash, the fuel switches were found in the run position, indicating that they had been turned back on before the crash. The report also noted that the aircraft had been refueled with correct fuel, and the samples were tested and found to be fine. If the fuel switches did indeed malfunction, was it a coincidence that both switches were turned off at almost the same time? While this case has generated many questions, the ongoing investigation will shed more light on whether it was an accident, a malfunction, or something more deliberate.